We are born free, and we will die free. The time in between, though, that's complicated. In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey, what is happening, people? Welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Excited to have you guys here. I got an awesome show for you today. It's a solo show. We're going to be talking about, just a few topics that, that I kind of just want to weigh in on. Some things that I've talked about in the past on this show. Some cases where, or a case where I did a large amount of interviews on the topic of the Sandusky scandal, which had some key evidence published that I definitely want to weigh in on because it's very significant. That'll be the last thing we talk about. We're also going to talk about, of course, Joe Biden. What's happening? Will he stay in the race? Will he drop out? Kamala Harris appearing coherent. What's happening? She's been laying off the wine. I'm not sure what's going on, but things are timing up that it looks like she could be taking over. We'll dig into that. Also, we'll talk about the whole Gavin Newsom dynamic of this. And, the past couple of interviews that I've done around, where I've talked about giving my thoughts on the election, which I think I've aired both of them the last 2 weeks on this show. So you've heard some of my thoughts, but I'll go into some more detail on really how this whole Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom triangle comes together. And then lastly, after we talk about Sandusky, I think I have a blueberry seed, stuck in my tooth from eating some blueberry pie. Got it. That's annoying when that happens. Lastly, there is video. If you want to see the video, go to our YouTube channel, our Rumble channel, and join. You can see me pick a blueberry seed, I think it was, out of my tooth. Exciting stuff. Okay. Libertarianism. I got in a bit of a Twitter back and forth with a LNC Libertarian Party. I don't know what her title is. I think secretary, I believe. But anyway, we'll talk about that. Not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I feel like I should address it and expand on where I'm coming from. If you don't already understand what my thoughts are on the Libertarian Party, I don't want people to take it the wrong way, like I'm personally attacking anyone. Not trying to do that. Okay, so I want to start off at the top of the show here today, and I want to talk about a recent little clip I saw, reel YouTube short. I think it's a YouTube short that I'm going to share from the Superfly podcast with David Spade and Dana Carvey. I didn't realize these two guys had a podcast. It's actually, I've never listened to the podcast, but I've seen a bunch of clips like this. I know they did one on COVID before that I think either I shared or Brian shared on his show. They have a pretty good back and forth. They're both excellent impressionists, and especially Dana Carvey. David Spade, also very funny guy. So they do have good banter back and forth. And on this episode, or this segment on their episode, they get into talking about Jill Biden and essentially, how she has kidnapped good old Joe Biden. So let's play that. We'll talk about it. And then I got a couple more topics I want to hit on with Joe Biden. And then we'll get into Kamala, Gavin Newsom, and the whole shebang here. So first, let's bring up old Dana and David. And here we go. From the Superfly podcast.
She's a doctor, but people are like, it's kind of like how Dr. Pepper is a doctor, where you don't really know what kind of doctor.
Did you get that picture of Jill on Vogue magazine? If you don't worry about it.
Oh, I'll get it in my mailbox in a minute. Mm-hmm.
You did great, Joey.
You answered every question.
She's all about the 2 shots, by the way. She runs up there and gets in that shot.
You did great, Joey. Joe, you
Yeah,
answered every question. Oh, you're tremendous.
High fives all around.
It made me think that he's not going to step down if he hasn't right before we started doing this podcast, because she's like, we're going to go, Joe. What if he kind of in a moment said, well, maybe I should step down. And then she
Jill.
would go, that's not going to happen.
Oh man, I love it. I can imagine that happen. That's essentially, I think, what we're dealing with this Joe Biden situation. It's still, you gotta love that when it's still playing and it keeps. Never mind. You didn't hear that, but I heard it in my ear. You gotta love that. How that probably has happened, not to the degree where Joe Biden's actually slapping Joe in the face, but I'm to the point that I don't feel bad for Joe Biden. I feel bad for what this is doing to really further, how it makes elder abuse look okay, which is not okay. And Joe Biden should not be president. Joe Biden should certainly not be running for another term of president. The new thing out there that they're saying, which I know a little bit about, is that Joe Biden has Parkinson's. That's what several doctors are saying who have seen him, recently over the past several months and years with his mannerisms and the way he talks and his stiff movements and his memory issues, thinking that Joe Biden has Parkinson's. Parkinson's, like I said, I know a little bit about it. It has a wide range of symptoms that are very different from person to person. So it and it's also almost impossible to 100% diagnose. They diagnose really based on if you have 3 or more of the symptoms, one being tremors, memory issues, movement issues, balance issues, stiffness, all of that. And they diagnose it that way. They also have a brain scan where they can look at, but there's nothing that is fully, 100% to say that someone has Parkinson's. So it is almost kind of one of those umbrella terms where, is it Parkinson's, or are we just talking about, just something to fit a bunch of symptoms underneath it. Now, I know about the causes of Parkinson's and the caused by the lack of dopamine and how that interacts in the brain. I get that, but I do wonder if sometimes things that are not Parkinson's get lumped underneath that umbrella just because that's just the way it is. But anyway, that's really not what's important here today. What's important today is Joe Biden should get out of the race. He should not be running for a second term as president. That's insane. And now you have people coming out, people on the left who are famous people on the left, like Rob Reiner, is now coming out and saying that Joe Biden should drop out of the race. And in a recent tweet, Rob Reiner said, "It is time to stop effing around." He used the actual word. I'm not going to use it because I like my YouTube to get viewership. "If the convicted felon wins, we lose our democracy. Joe Biden has effectively served U.S. with honor, decency, and dignity. It's time for Joe Biden to step down." And that is lunatic psychopath Rob Reiner. And so a couple things about this tweet. So Rob Reiner, and this is very common on the left for people to couch the Trump-Biden race this way: a convicted felon and Donald Trump, some guy who has the morals of an alley cat, as Joe Biden has one good line in the debate, against this upstanding statesman Joe Biden who's honest, and it's just total crap. Like, Joe Biden is the biggest liar going. The first time he ran for president, he had to drop out of the race because he got caught in too many lies. He still peddles ridiculous lies, like during the debate when he peddled the Fine People hoax. Unfortunately, Trump did a terrible job. of pushing back against that and didn't just outright say, Joe, if you listened to one sentence earlier, you would have heard that I disavowed white supremacists. But Trump is incapable of actually, speaking in full sentences like that during a debate, and just speaks in catchphrases and goes back to the narrative he wants to drill home. So I can't stand this on the left, who you have people like Rob Reiner who say it like Joe Biden is some amazing person and Donald Trump is a dirtbag. Donald Trump probably is a dirtbag, but so is Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is probably more of a dirtbag, which kind of ties into my second point here, in that the other thing I talk about is saving democracy. If you're voting for Donald Trump, you're voting against democracy, which doesn't make sense. We're voting, right? This is a so-called democracy. So if we're voting, then how are we voting against democracy? Anyway, but the point being, Democrats are actively participating in anti-democratic behavior by running a shadow government, because Joe Biden, as we all know, is not capable of being president right now. So who is president? Who is making the decisions? Who is, really running the strings behind the scenes of Joe Biden's puppet hands? Susan Rice, Barack Obama, I'm sure a whole other cast of characters, the rest of the cabinet there, I'm sure. But essentially what they're saying is, those who want Joe Biden to stay in the race, they're saying, let's vote for this shadow government, keep it the same way. A shadow government is better than Donald Trump, and a shadow government is saving democracy. How insane is that? Like, that's exactly what the people in the race who want Joe Biden to stay in are advocating for. They're advocating for a shadow government. Of course, you have people like Rob Reiner who are like, you know what? We can't really get by with this shadow government. This is looking too crazy. We have to have Joe step down and have Kamala step up. Of course, by doing that, if Joe Biden does step down, what are they doing? They are admitting that this whole thing has been a farce. They're admitting that Joe Biden does not have the mental capabilities, capacity, intellectual capacity to be president, and this whole thing has been a lie, and it's been a shadow government all along. So either way, the left is kind of screwed no matter what they do here. And of course, you have your, diehard leftists, the probably 60 to 80% of voting Democrats, who don't care if it was literally, weekend at Joe Biden's, Bernie Sanders, weekend at Bernie's style, where he's propped up. They would vote for him. I mean, I've talked about it so much on this show. They voted for John Fetterman, for Pete's sake, when he really could not complete a sentence. Of course, he's recovered. Good for John Fetterman. Seems to be communicating better now, getting better from his stroke. That's a good thing. I'm not going to wish ill on the guy. But when he was running in the run-up to the actual election, John Fetterman could not communicate. And in Pennsylvania, the Democrats did not care. No effect at all. They would vote for a non-commutative John Fetterman over the used car salesman like Dr. Oz. But anyway, so the other piece of this, of course, if Kamala does step in for Joe Biden, is Kamala actually capable of running a coherent campaign? Is she capable of not fumbling her words and speaking in word salads? Is she capable of actually, getting people to support her and getting the left and the moderates and people like that to really coalesce around her and support her? Being, of course, the first DEI vice president and wanting to be the first DEI president. And, people like Gavin Newsom and many other on the left have said that calling Kamala Harris a DEI hire is racist. And there was an article written in the New York Post by Charlie Gasparino where, Charlie says just that Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, and it is factual that Joe Biden did, this is, when he selected her as his running mate, as his vice president, Joe Biden said, I'm going to hire a woman. I'm going to hire a person of color. And he put those parameters on it. So everyone knew that the filter of vice presidential candidates had to fit in those qualifiers. So if you were outside of those filters, you had no chance. If you were a man, if you were a white person, you had no chance. So the reality of it is Joe Biden put up barriers to hire a DEI vice president, which is what he did. And people get angry about this when you point it out. All it does is diminish Kamala Harris. It diminishes her let's put it this way. Let's imagine that Kamala Harris was actually a fantastic candidate, a qualified candidate, that she was the best vice president you can imagine. Just close your eyes and imagine that for a second. Picture what a great vice president would be. Picture she's like, slashing the Department of Education, and she wants to audit the Fed and all of these things. Just whatever in your mind you want to imagine would be the best vice president. So picture that as a Kamala Harris, and also picture that person was also placed there because of their gender and because of the color of their skin. So it would minimize every good thing that she did. And in this case, it still does, even though she's a terrible vice president. It minimizes her qualifications because the filters have been put around that it wasn't an open pool of candidates. And when it's not an open pool of candidates, when it can't go to anyone, you're saying by default that you are not hiring the best candidate because you have limited the scope of your hiring pool to such an extent that you're excluding, who would be some of the competition and candidates. But you guys understand that, it's the people on the left who want to use this to really weaponize DEI and anyone who opposes DEI and call those people racists, when in fact, we're not racist. The ones who are using DEI as a way to hire people, to exclude others, those are the people who are hiring based on gender, based on race. It's not people who are criticizing it. It's the ones who are implementing it. Those are the ones who are racist. So Gavin Newsom, like I said, and I'll throw his tweet up there. Gavin Newsom had a tweet where he said, of course, my screen goes blank. It wouldn't be a time sharing on StreamYard. I didn't have an issue. All right. Gavin Newsom shares the image of the article. The article, of course, says America may soon be subjected to the country's first DEI president, Kamala Harris. Gavin Newsom says 2 points here, guys. 1, Joe Biden is our next president. And 2, this is straight up racist. So I really addressed the second point. We're not going to talk any more about that. But to get back to his first point there, Gavin Newsom says, number 1, guys, Joe Biden is president. Joe Biden is running for president. And people might look at that and think, well, Gavin Newsom probably wants to be president, right? So isn't Gavin Newsom going to try to figure a way to weasel his way in there to replace Joe Biden on the ticket? And John Ziegler is the one who's pointed this out to me, and you should check out his podcast, The Death of Journalism. It's behind a paywall. It's fantastic. It's worth the becoming a patron. So definitely encourage you to check it out. But what Ziegler pointed out, which I think makes complete sense, is there is no bigger cheerleader for Joe Biden right now to stay in the race and then lose to Donald Trump than Gavin Newsom. That would benefit Gavin Newsom tremendously. If Joe Biden stays in the race and loses, that benefits Gavin Newsom. Because if you think about it, so Biden stays in, loses, versus Biden drops out, it has to be Kamala Harris who who takes over Joe Biden's spot on the ballot, probably with Pete Buttigieg as the Buttigieg, whatever his name is, Mayor Pete as the vice presidential candidate. That's probably the most likely scenario if there is a switch. It has to be Kamala Harris. They cannot go away. The left and their DEI hires and their obsession with race and gender cannot go away from the first female vice president. And when the president steps away, they have to elevate Kamala into to the top of the ticket. There's no other option, which would be awful for Gavin Newsom. Here's a couple different ways to look at it. So let's say Joe Biden stays in the race. Joe Biden wins re-election. Joe Biden is old. He's 82, going to be 83. Maybe he serves 2 years of his next term. Kamala takes over. Kamala, the first woman, first female, the first minority, the first person of color elected, not elected, to serve as president, will be up for re-election in 2028, and she will win. She would be up for re-election again because she can serve two full terms. Actually, she could serve 10 years. So she would win. She would probably win in 2028, and then she would win again in 2032. By that point in time, Gavin Newsom would be totally irrelevant. He would have been out of politics for so long, he wouldn't be able to keep his name relevant. The worst thing that can happen for Gavin Newsom is either Biden getting reelected and then handing it to Kamala and Kamala taking over, or Biden stepping down, Kamala stepping up, and Kamala winning this year and winning in 2028. The best thing for Gavin Newsom is Biden stays in the race, Trump wins, and then in 2028, it's Gavin Newsom probably leading the way for the Democrats because they have nobody else who's worth a crap. He would in a primary, he would probably wipe the floor with Kamala because she's coming off a one-term vice president with a terrible record, a terrible track record for Democratic primaries because she left that early, if you remember, back in 2020. So Gavin Newsom probably would have a path there easily, but that's the only path he has. So this is why you see Gavin Newsom out there campaigning so hard for Joe Biden. He's trying to resuscitate his campaign, keep him in the race, keep him upright, keep him moving towards that election in November. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Gavin Newsom out there on the road with Joe Biden, literally holding him up like Weekend at Bernie's. That probably will happen. And the other side of this, of course, if Biden does step down, and I do think it's possible Biden steps down. I don't think it's very likely. Of course, top of the show, Superfly podcast, David Spade, Dana Carvey. Joe Biden, big piece of this. Joe Biden does not want Joey out. Hunter Biden does not want Joey out. You got Hunter Biden involved in meetings at the White House now. Convicted felon Hunter Biden involved in meetings when they're trying to campaign against convicted felon Donald Trump. The optics are terrible for the Biden administration to have Hunter Biden there in the White House in meetings. Why is Hunter Biden there? I don't know. He's speaking for his father. He's advocating for his father. He doesn't want to give up that gravy train, nor do all the rest of the Biden relatives, the brothers of Joe Biden, and whoever else is benefiting off the Biden gravy train. They want him in, and they're going to shield him. They're going to try to protect him to keep him in. Also, his administration, I'm sure, wants him to stay in. Anthony Blinken and all these other people in his cabinet. They have jobs. They want to keep their jobs. They like being important. They like traveling the world. They like whining and dining with other world leaders and feeling great and traveling to the Ukraine and playing in rock concerts with Volodymyr Zelensky. They love that life. They don't want to give it up. And they probably think the best path to maintaining that life is just getting Joe Biden to November. If you switch it up with Kamala, it's a big wild card. What's going to happen? Is she going to be coherent? Is she going to be crazy? What's she going to say? So we might have got some information on that recently. Is there a new Kamala Harris who is now a little more coherent? I think it's possible, and I'll let you be the judge of it. It's a recent appearance. Kamala does seem to be more out front, making more appearances recently. She's traveling everywhere with Joe Biden. Is that intentional? Is there something going on there? You can be the judge of what you think of this new Kamala Harris.
Sadly, the press has not been covering it as much as they should in proportion to the seriousness of what happened when the United States Supreme Court essentially told this individual who has been convicted of 34 felonies that he will be immune from essentially the activity he has told us he is prepared to engage in if he gets back into the White House. Understand what we all know. In 122 days, we each have the power to decide what kind of country we want to live in. Understand what we know. When there has been a full-on intentional attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. When I talk about the family that raised me, yes, they took me in a stroller as they were marching and shouting for justice, knowing that justice will not be achieved unless we are prepared to march and shout and fight for it. And one of the ways we do that is through our vote.
I'll tell you what that reminded me of? Nothing to do with her race. That reminded me of Barack Obama, which, that should scare people. That should scare, people who want Donald Trump to win. And I'll tell you what, was it perfect? No, but there was not much word salad there. She obviously had memorized what she was going to say. She stayed on point. She didn't cackle, which is big. No awkward cackles or smiles or claps or weird shoulder shrugs and dance moves. When she starts getting animated and feeling comfortable, that's when Kamala Harris is at her worst. Now, when she's able to stay on point, she has a narrative that she's driving home. I mean, she's been a prosecutor. She can deliver a closing statement. She can deliver some one-liners if it's fed to her. If she has a good group of people around her handling her, she could actually look halfway decent, I think. Maybe. Now, when I say the comparison to Obama, what that reminded me of, that was, a minute, 10 seconds, where she said nothing, but you could tell that she had the crowd going along with her. I remember the first time I saw Barack Obama speak. I was traveling. I was in the Chicago airport. He's on, the TV is giving a speech. This is when he, I think, had declared for running for president. He's running against Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary. And there's a crowd of people around these TVs just locked in, just infatuated. And I'm just watching. And this is at the early stages of my interest in politics. I had just, found, Ron Paul and started to read LouRockwell.com. And I'm, starting to digest politics and changing my views from neoconservatism to more of the liberty side. And I listened to this Barack Obama speech and I said, holy shit, this guy just spoke for 10 minutes, said nothing of any substance, and people they're awestruck. They're looking around, the people mouths just agape, just in love with this guy on TV who really said nothing at all. And that, my friends, is a skill, a dangerous skill, how you're able to hypnotize people by really saying nothing, just making them feel like they're a part of something when in reality they're a part of nothing. It's hard to even explain, but I did. I mean, she's not anywhere close to the orator that Barack Obama is, and she's never going to be there. So I'm not saying like, oh, she's like Obama in that they are on the same plane. They're nowhere close from a persuasion standpoint, any of that. What I'm saying is there was a hint of that. And the climate today in 2024 versus Donald Trump is very different than the climate back in 2008 when Barack Obama was running. With Barack Obama, there was a lot more movement between right and left and who are you supporting? You're supporting the Republican, the Democrat. Now today, there's like 42% of each side is locked in and they're not leaving either side no matter what happens. And you're fighting over this little percentage in the middle, and RFK's scooping up a little bit of it too. So she doesn't really have to do a lot. She just has to be a little bit better, a little bit more coherent than Joe Biden, which is scary because she might be able to do that. And if she can just be a little more coherent than Joe Biden, and, you know, she can get the right handlers around her with messaging and you know, really teeing her up with the right narrative to drive home, she could beat Donald Trump. People are going to say that sounds crazy, but it could happen. I mean, I would love to see a debate between the two of them. I give her maybe, you know, if it is her and Donald Trump, looking at it today, now things can change today, I'd give her maybe a 20% chance. You know, Trump 80%, obviously. But things could change. I mean, that could shift as well, depending on what happens between now and November. You know, all in all, I do think there is about a 50 to 60% chance that Joe Biden drops out and Kamala takes over. And that 40 to 45% chance of Joe Biden staying in, I mean, that's Jill Biden clinging to the first ladyship, with everything she's got, keeping Joe Biden in there, which is just a terrible thing. And it's elder abuse and it's awful. And she's a terrible person, and she deserves to be called out for that all the time. Anyway, enough politics talk for now. I'll come back to it again at the end. We'll talk about the Libertarian Party for a few moments, but I wanted to talk about Jerry Sandusky a little bit. So I mentioned my friend John Ziegler before in his podcast. Of course, he had another podcast called With the Benefit of Hindsight, where it's the most thorough deep dive into the Jerry Sandusky Penn State scandal that you can get anywhere. Also, though, you can get quite a deep dive into the scandal from at Lions of Liberty from the work that I have done. If I could find the website myself right here, it's lionsofliberty.com/Sandusky scandal, and you can get every interview that I've done here at Felony Friday and Finding Freedom. I've talked to many experts on the case, of course, Ziegler, and I've talked to former Penn State President Graham Spanier. I've talked to the federal agent who investigated the case, John Snedden, who investigated in order to approve Graham Spanier's security clearance at the time, and found that there was no wrongdoing, no evidence of any abuse or rapes occurring. Anyway, whole host of different people. Mark Pendergrast, who's an expert in memory and repressive memory theory. So I know a lot about this case. I know more than most people, a lot more, like 100 times more than most people. And there's a lot of different angles you can get into this case. And interestingly enough, I've had a couple discussions recently with people that I know who went to Penn State and thought that this whole thing was actually real, and Jerry Sandusky, is guilty, and kids were abused. And, I broke it down for them that that's not the case, and it's not close. Of course, the best way to have that conversation is just to start with, what do you know about the case? And then just answer their questions and expand on really what they don't know. Because a lot of what people think they know about the case is just simply not true. And when you start peeling back the layers, you'll see that it's really not close at all. And the one area that I've talked about a lot, but up until this time, the information was not released. So what I've referenced on this show quite a bit, and John Ziegler referenced when he was on this show, Ralph Cipriano referenced when he was on this show as well, is Jerry Sandusky's medical records. Okay. And Jerry Sandusky's medical records were not included in the trial. Jerry Sandusky's lawyer at the time is overwhelmed. He has all of this evidence to go through. And Jerry Sandusky, I guess it came out in this article, which was released to the Daily Mail by Frank Parlato, who was also on this show within the past few months here. Frank Parlato is new to the Jerry Sandusky scandal, trying to expose the truth here, trying to show people that Jerry Sandusky is in fact innocent. And the individuals involved in the case, the accusers, are seeking money, or were seeking money, then they got money. So Frank Parlato, he had a couple different exclusives. He had an exclusive interview with Jerry Sandusky in jail that he released to the Daily Mail. And then he released Jerry Sandusky's medical records to the Daily Mail. And Ziegler, I listened on his show a couple days ago. He's not happy about it, which I understand why. Ziegler intentionally was, and Cipriano as well. They were supposed to release the medical records years ago. I believe was an article that was going to run in Newsweek, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. But the article got canned at the last minute and was not included. So they did not release the medical records. And Ziegler has said the reason why he still had not released them up until Frank Parlato did here is because his thinking was you want to wait and give an exclusive at the right time, if possible, to get the largest reaction, the largest response, the most amount of attention. So he was saving that bullet. That's the way Ziegler was looking at it. And I can understand that. I get that. But there also does come a point in time, which I can also understand Frank Parlato here. And I haven't talked to Frank about this when I have him back on the show. I plan to, try to understand why he did this now, what his thinking was. But the lens I'm viewing this through is we live in a very different media landscape than we used to. So with the medical records out now, and what the medical records have revealed is that Jerry Sandusky suffers from hypogonadism, which is a condition in which his body does not produce testosterone. So he's very low testosterone. He's had very low testosterone. These medical records are between like 2003 and 2005. This was during the time period when he was supposedly abusing boys, teenage boys. It's not even young. A lot of people think that the medical records, he was abusing young boys. That was I think that was the accusation. No, the accusation was that he was actually abusing teenagers. And the facts are, in his medical records, that he didn't have the testosterone to probably be able to get an erection. Very likely that he was unable to do that. So a lot of these accusations involved that. And the other thing is, Jerry Sandusky also suffered from atrophied testicles. What does that mean? That means he literally almost did not have testicles. So what's the significance of that? And this is kind of the way that I've talked about this case. So of all of the accusers, not one accuser, and they've brought forth all kinds of accusations of sexual abuse where they would have had a view of Jerry Sandusky's private parts. Not one accuser mentioned the fact that he literally does not have testicles. Now, that's huge. Is that enough alone to set him free? Probably not. But when I'm talking to people about this case, often that's one of the things I'll bring up, because that starts to be like, oh, wait a minute, there's more to this story here. Okay, let's figure out what's going on. How did this happen? So maybe I won't lead with that bit of bit of evidence, but it's something that I will introduce in the conversation, within the first 5 to 10 minutes if we're talking about this case and I'm talking with someone who's open to hearing about the facts. So when I look at this case, I'm happy now that the medical records are released. It's something I can cite. It's something I can link to. I'll link to it on the show notes page. And this is important too. In the modern media landscape, it's not necessarily who breaks the case. That's not always who gets the virality of the case, who gets something to go viral. It could be anybody picking it up, any podcast, any show, multiple podcasts, and that gets more eyes on it. So getting it out there, giving people a source to go to, and then multiple sources, and it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds until it gets to a point that it explodes. That is how modern media can operate. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here, but this gives us, I think, a good chance to get a very important piece of evidence out there on this case that people have no idea about, and get some eyes on it. And that's exactly what happened in the past few days. The Drinkin' Bros podcast picked up this Daily Mail article, and they talked about it on their show. So we're going to play a clip from the Drinkin' Bros podcast talking about this new evidence being released in the Jerry Sandusky scandal.
Last story here. Holy Sandusky.
This is a wild one, boys.
Woo, buckle up, kids. We're ending on a banger today. Crucial medical evidence that could have cleared former college football coach Jerry Sandusky of molesting boys was never presented to his trial because he was embarrassed about it. DailyMail.com can exclusively reveal that the disgraced Penn State football legend was unable to perform sexually, according to health records that have surfaced in his case as it heads toward an appeal. And now a leading physician is claiming that Sandusky's condition does not support allegations made by the accusers. Quote, Sandusky's medical record does not seem to support the accusations, Dr. Robert Oxenholt said, a physician with decades of experience treating patients with similar conditions. In fact, it's quite contradictory. Sandusky, 80, is currently serving a 30 to 60-year sentence for being found guilty in 2012 of 45 counts of sexual abuse of young boys. He was charged with molesting and raping 10 boys he met at his Second Mile charity over a 15-year period from 1994 to 2009. In an exclusive prison interview 12 years after his conviction, Sandusky spoke publicly for the first time to Daily Mail and maintained his innocence and claimed his accusers were manipulated by investigators and motivated by money. Now unearthed medical documents have revealed that Sandusky suffers from
Hypogonadism, which is low testosterone.
Gonadism?
Gonads. That is the medical term for your testicles.
For your
gonads.
ball sack?
Yeah.
It's fucking gonads, dude?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's not.
All right, that's the clip there. And I didn't listen to the rest of the show. I'm really not sure what else they talked about. They referenced that was towards the end of the show. So I'll have to go back and listen to that. But that's what I'm talking about. So the evidence is now out there. The medical records are now released, which, would you like it to be a bigger story? Would you like it for, Fox News and CNN and whoever else to pick it up, and for it to be on, Zero Hedge and the Drudge Report and all of these people to pick it up and run the headline, and for there to be features on Good Morning America and whatever else shows people watch? I don't know. Sure, that would be ideal, but that was never likely to happen anyway. And with it now being out there and being a source people can point to and look at, and there will be more interviews, with people on the case talking about this aspect of it. I'll be doing an interview with Frank Perlato in the coming weeks. And that's what it's all about. That's how modern decentralized media operates. That's how we build a story, build a narrative. And I'm not saying that this one thing is going to lead to, Jerry Sandusky being vindicated and, getting an appeal and ultimately winning. The chances of that are probably very low, extremely low. Probably a better chance of Gavin Newsom being elected president in 2024, which those chances are almost zero. So that's an actually interesting thing to think about. Who is a better chance? What's a better chance? Jerry Sandusky getting out of prison and being declared innocent or not guilty, or Gavin Newsom winning an election in 2024. I don't know what better odds are. Probably Gavin Newsom, which and those odds are pretty darn low. So, but anyway, that's kind of off the beaten path. The way that I look at this case, Sandusky's old. It's unfortunate. He's probably going to end up rotting in prison. That's a shame. But just more people who can know the truth, who can understand what happened here. So hopefully in the future, we can prevent the same thing from happening again to someone else and more lives being ruined at the end of the day. I think that's the best that we can hope for from this. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I care about the truth, and I'll keep presenting the truth. And people who don't like it, you're going to have to deal with it. That's where I'm at on this case and really on everything else. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was a tweet that I sent out here. So let me share this tab. This was today. This was on Sunday, July 7th. Whoops, of course. Oh man, it's getting late in the show. I'm just trying to share my screen, and there we go. All right, so Karen Ann Harlows, who I think was, maybe still is, the secretary of the Libertarian Party. I don't know her. I have nothing against her personally. This is more just a response to the libertarians who speak this way than being directed at Karen Ann specifically. She very well could be a great lady. Nothing personal against her. This is not a personal attack. So this could very well be many other libertarians I know would say the same thing. So, you can put their name in there too. So she said, though, apparently now libertarians aren't supposed to say legalize heroin. I said it. The Republican Party is down the hall to the right, to those confused. And I said, I quote tweeted it, stay irrelevant, in quotes, legalize heroin, sex work is real work. These slogans guarantee no one will ever take you seriously. And, my point with this, and I had a follow-up tweet too, and I'll share that as well. Might as well get everything out there. So she responds, she quotes me saying, "Oh no, a libertarian saying libertarian things. Better to be a relevant whore." Was that the whole thing? Where's the rest of her? Better to be a relevant whore. So she's calling me a whore. And really, I really, it's not really about being relevant. My point with Libertarian Party and the way that I responded to this tweet, I said, it's better not to masquerade a valuable legal theory, which is what libertarianism is, as a political party, in order to stay relevant to a bunch of self-sabotaging degenerates. Maybe that's a bit harsh. That was probably a bit harsh to say that. But this next part is very true. I should have left the LP. First part's true also. It's all true. I should have left the LP the first time I saw an idiot waving a dildo in the air at the front of a convention, not to be taken seriously. And let me say this first. So obviously I know a lot of people who are still very involved with the Libertarian Party, one of them being Brian McWilliams, my colleague here at Lions of Liberty. I wish everyone involved that I know who are good people involved with the Libertarian Party, I wish everyone the best. I honestly do. I hope that, well, I'm not going to say I hope I'm wrong, because I don't hope I'm wrong. I know I'm right. But the point is, I'm not wishing any ill will on anyone's efforts. If you want to put efforts into the Libertarian Party, go for it. I just think that they are futile, and I think that you're wasting time. Because you have there's many reasons, but one reason, which I was getting at in this tweet, is you have a large segment of people in the Libertarian Party and in the greater libertarian movement who care more about saying edgy things, about saying things like legalize heroin, legalize cocaine, sex work is real work. And, maybe it's not only they care about saying edgy things, maybe they really believe those things. And they're like, yeah, heroin's awesome. Anyone should be able to do heroin. That's just a stupid thing to message on. To think that that's a good idea to message on legalizing an addictive drug that ruins lives, or to message on sex work, prostitution being valuable work, is just asinine. Now, with that being said, do I think that drugs should be illegal? No. Do I think that sex work should be illegal? No. But do I think that, anyone that I care about should be doing, heroin? No, you shouldn't be doing heroin. If you want to have a successful life and you want to deliver value to this world, should you be doing heroin? No. Should you be a prostitute? No. It's not good for your health. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for anything. So to think that messaging on those degenerate behaviors is a good idea is just stupid. And there are a large segment of people in the Libertarian Party who want to message that way. And that's what I'm getting at when I'm saying that the Libertarian Party really should not be a political party. It is a legal theory. It's a legal structure. It's not enough by itself to be a political party. You need to have some sort of morality as well. Otherwise, you're never going to get families supporting you. And you end up with a candidate like Chase Oliver, who's advocating for taking children to drag shows and advocating for puberty blockers for kids, chemical castration. That's where that leads. It can't lead anywhere else. Like if using libertarianism as a political party, as a political vehicle, will always end up leading down that road to the left, to those types of behaviors. There is, and I mean, so what could you do? What else could you do? Could you? And I've seen other people like Reed Cooley say this, that you need to message more, have a right-wing message to go along with the libertarian message. Yes, you could do that. I think you want to change the name of the party, though, if you start doing that, because it's something else then. It's not just libertarianism. So it's a tough spot to be in, honestly. And I'm not claiming to have the answers, really, which is why I've stepped away. I don't think it's really a valuable use of my time to, participate in party activities, to go to conventions, to go to county meetings, to do any of that stuff, to interview libertarian candidates, to do any of that. I don't think that's valuable for my time in any way whatsoever. And I think, unfortunately, and I've talked about this in I've talked about this on other shows. My fear is that, please don't, someone's going to listen to this and say, you're talking about me. Like, I'm really not. I'm not talking about any specific individual here. I'm just talking about, in general, this could happen to some person where they spend all their time working in the Libertarian Party and they're, in their county, their county chair, they work their way up, they get involved in national, they run campaigns, they manage campaigns, they run for office. All of a sudden they turn around, they start doing this when they're 20 years old, they turn around when they're 50 and they have no family, they have no legacy, they have no children, They didn't put time into their career to build up a business or to build up a job where they have some sort of a nest egg. Maybe they're still, renting, which is not the worst thing in the world. It makes sense to rent a lot of the time. So I guess that's not a good example. Maybe either way, financially, they're not well off. Let's just say that. And they look back, they're 50 years old. They look, what happened to the last 30 years? What did I do? What did I do with my life? That's my fear. That's what I'm trying to protect against. I don't want people to waste their time in a political party where they could be pouring their talents and their time and their resources and their, investing their money into themselves, into building themselves, into building a business, into building a family. I mean, that's what's going to make a difference. I mean, that's what's going to move culture. That's what's going to give you fulfillment in this world, not a party. And, people will give me crap saying, "Oh, John, you're in the Republican Party now." I'm a registered Republican. I'm not active in the Republican Party. I vote. I changed to vote in local elections. Likely, I will vote for Donald Trump, but I hate Donald Trump. I can't stand him. He's annoying. I do find him entertaining sometimes, but I mean, the guy's just so frustrating to that debate. Just to watch him debate, it's one of the most frustrating things in the world because you just kind of just want him to say the right thing, but he's nowhere close to it. Like Joe Biden's 100 times worse than Donald Trump on most things, and that's not really close. RFK, he's a lost cause. So, and I've said this before many times, the presidency doesn't affect your life, too much anyway. So at the end of the day, Joe Biden wins. If Donald Trump wins, sure, there will be some effects. Your taxes might be higher with Joe Biden. The economy could become shitty with either of them. Inflation could become terrible with either of them. So at the end of the day, who's more anti-war? Probably Donald Trump a little bit. Who's more likely to not get us into World War III? Probably Donald Trump by a little bit. So when you break it down that way, who wants to pull us out of Ukraine, stop sending our money there? Donald Trump. Israel, they're both terrible. So it's really a wash there. So it's when you start looking at issues like that, I think it's pretty clear that Trump is better. He's not a libertarian, but if he does get some people in his ear, like Vivek Ramaswamy, maybe you do get some libertarian type things happening. Maybe you get a reduction in the Department of Education. Maybe you get an audit of the Federal Reserve. Maybe you get some of those things. Hopefully you get some of those things. I in no way am saying that I think it will happen. It could happen though. Like when I had Jeremy Kauffman on, you can kind of like squint a little bit when you look at a potential Trump presidency and think, well, it's possible if this happens and that happens. And if it lines up that, if he does this, that he thinks it makes him look good, maybe it could be better for liberty. So you have that going for you, like the old Dumb and Dumber. So you tell me there's a chance. On the Joe Biden side, there's no chance. There's not even a 1 in a million shot. So that's where I'm at with the election. If anybody cares, I've been talking for an hour. I have no idea what I've been talking about. I blacked out. So hopefully you all enjoyed the show today. I enjoy doing these solo shows, especially when I have some things to talk about that I'm excited about, which I did today. Want to encourage everyone to, if you do want to give the Jerry Sandusky case a deeper dive, you can go to lionsofliberty.com/Sandusky-scandal. And you can see every episode that I've done on the scandal there. You can go on the journey that I went on with every interview, where I went from thinking this guy's guilty to knowing that this guy's innocent. So if you want to go on that journey, I encourage you to do it. Encourage you to share it with your friends. It's one of the biggest injustices in the history of the modern age. So I think everyone should be educated about it. That is all I have for this week, guys. Like always, if you like this show, Finding Freedom, you can subscribe just to this feed. Finding Freedom with John Odermatt is on all the podcasting apps. Or if you want to get everything, my show, Brian's show, Mean Age Daydream, Meme Wars on a Friday. You can get all of that by subscribing to the Lions of Liberty Network feed. And of course, if you want even more content from us, you can subscribe on Patreon or on Locals. And we have our new Telegram channel as well. We have our new Telegram Pride group as well. So you can check all of that out. I have links to everything on the show notes page at lionsofliberty.com. I'll be back next week with another awesome episode. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.